Hey guys, so welcome back to the Power of Care podcast. So I'm your host, Brianna Dance, and today we have an amazing guest, Christina Jones, my girl. Hey boo!
Hey girl!
Y'all, her resume is so long, I cannot even put it on my card. So I'm going to pick up these papers, and you're going to listen. Okay, so y'all, she is the Chief Executive of External Relations for the Battered Women Justice Project. Before this, though, she served as the Special Counsel for Strategic Youth Initiatives for the D.C. Office of the Attorney General, also known as the OAG. She also was the Assistant Chief for the Criminal and Juvenile Section for the OAG and the Assistant State's Attorney in Prince George's County, Maryland. She is a strong advocate for sexual assault prevention. She has used her training and experience to design and implement consent and sexual assault seminars for teenagers around Washington, D.C., including the first D.C. Teen Dating Violence Summit in February of 2020. She has used her voice and pen to advocate for Black women's safety, and her articles have been featured in publications including Time Magazine, Sirius XM, Urban Radio, CBS Radio, Yahoo News, law review articles because she's an attorney, and various podcasts. She is the owner and founder of Command Joy Co., LLC, and consulting firm, which is dedicated to assisting faith-based organizations in the crucial areas of sexual assault prevention, sexual harassment training, and infrastructure safety. She is also the co-host of the Mary and Martha podcast. And in the podcast, this is for women of color who want to understand the Bible in a way that is relevant in their daily lives. The podcast launched in March of 2019 and has over 60,000 downloads. She's a DC resident where she lives with her husband Jason, hey Jason, and her son Xavier and her cat Zamunda.
I always leave Zamunda in there.
You can't leave him out.
Right.
He's a part of the family. Okay, and I'm not done. And she's also a member of the Paul Public Charter School Board of Trustees and serves on the PTO for her son's school. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Rhetoric from the University of Maryland, College Park, and a Juris Doctorate from the Howard University School of Law.
Yeah, HU.
So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I did a Power of Care a long time ago. I mean, we did like an interview. Literally, this was 5-6 years. This is how long you've been doing this
I have.
for our community. So I just want to thank you for being a mouthpiece and like highlighting all the amazing things that go on. So
thank you
girl.
so much. Oh my God. Okay, so let me tell you guys how I know Christine. Well, I've known you for a long time. She's like a big sister to me, and I've always looked up to you because you've always been just like a sharp advocate. I've always seen you as like a truth teller. Y'all, she's a friend that will be like, your toenails are chipped. But she'll tell you that because she doesn't want you to look crazy. You know what I mean?
Facts.
But you did tell me that. You were like, one day, you were like, oh, your leggings. I can see through them. But I appreciated that. And I was like, oh, really? I didn't know. She's a truth teller, y'all. And she's here to tell us the truth today.
Truth and love.
Truth and love to make sure that we live well and to make sure that other people feel safe and to feel seen, and your life is committed to that. Thank you for all the work you've done.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back to childhood a little bit because I know you are an advocate for women, specifically who have experienced sexual assault, abuse. Can you tell me like when you were introduced to like those terms and that type of experience?
Yeah. So I'm actually a survivor of child sexual abuse. And for me, it's when you look at the stats, 1 in 4 Black girls will be abused before the age of 18, sexually abused. And when you look at the stats and you look at your friend groups, like, you can just really count 1, 2, you, 1, 2, you, because that's how pervasive it is in our communities. We also know that for every rape that is reported by a Black woman, 15 rapes are not. So this isn't something that we really talk about, at least publicly. And I think for me, it's important to talk about it because a lot of people think, oh, people who have been sexually abused, like, now they have mental health issues, or they're on drugs, or they're prostitute. Like, it's like, no, first of all, stop judging people for the way they work through their trauma.
Right.
But second of all, sexual assault survivors are walking in the streets, in restaurants, in clubs, like in churches.
Yeah.
So we're everywhere. So for me, it's important to put a face to what sexual assault actually looks like. And for me, I was one of the very few sexual assault survivors who had my case prosecuted.
Wow.
So I remember being 9 years old, and I had, in every step of the way, the police detective who I talked to at 9 was a white man. The doctor who examined me at the hospital was a white man. The prosecutor who handled my case was a white man. The judge who handled the case was a white man. So for me, it was like, I do not see myself in any of this system that I'm going through that young. And I remember thinking, oh, the prosecutor's not really listening to what we have to say. I was victim number 4, by the way. So I remember thinking, I'm going to grow up one day and I'm going to become a prosecutor so that, victims like me can really see themselves in the system and somebody's actually listening to them. So thankfully, I stayed on that path. And I don't know, like 10, 13 years later, I became a prosecutor in that very same courthouse where I was victim number 4. So right here in Prince George's County Circuit Court. And for me, that was really powerful to walk in to the courthouse in a different capacity where I was actually the one serving, the residents and the people who had these issues. So I was a prosecutor for 8 years. My specialty was child sexual assault and sexual abuse and intimate partner violence. So I saw kids who were sexually abused. I saw, young women who were sexually abused. And I never told them my story because for me that's inappropriate to insert myself into their story. But it was really cool when I would have survivors who I would be prosecuting their case, and they would say, Miss Jones, were you sexually abused? And it would always catch me off guard. And I wouldn't lie because I have been. And I had one young woman that was just like, I can tell because of the way you're treating me. Like, no one's ever treated me with this much respect or dignity. So I could just tell you've been through this too because of how you're moving throughout the system. And to me, that was the ultimate compliment because that's why I became a prosecutor. And she was just like, you're encouraging me to go to law school. And I'm like, girl, don't do it. But that, that for me is my why. And also for me, my abuser was a leader in the church that I grew up at. So it's like the convergence of being a survivor, being a prosecutor, being a nonprofit executive, and having that, thing about me that is something that makes me a part of who I am. God does not do everything that happens to you is not good.
Right.
Period.
Period.
But God will get glory out of your story. Yeah. And like God will make things work together for the good. Right. Not that the things are good, but for the good. So for me, it's like, how can I do the most good? So I started a company called Command Joy Co. LLC in 2023. And we do work with churches and other faith-based communities that really look at safety for kids. So the number one reason why churches are sued is child sexual abuse. People don't know that. And for me, it was about how can we make the actual environmental space safer. So a lot of people don't even think about, are there rooms with no windows and on their doors or that you can see in that create unsafe spaces for kids? How do you have spaces where kids can be taken to where no one can see them? Are you operating in a way where if you have to have a private conversation with a young person, can you be seen and not heard? So like, can I see you in the lobby, but you're far enough away that I don't have to hear you? What are we doing for our volunteer management? How are we onboarding volunteers? A lot of churches think that they're doing something really great by doing background checks. But I just said, out of every one rape, 15 aren't reported. Background checks are not enough.
Right.
Are we calling the person's previous church and just asking questions like, how were they? You know, how were they with the kids? Oftentimes, those reference checks are the things that's going to highlight way more than a background check will. Mm-hmm. So really, how can we stop the grooming that happens in church so that kids can be safe? So that kind of evolved into this January. I was thinking about, all right, how can I do some more work for my community? And my husband's a pastor. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Pastor Bay, Jason Jones. And I said, I have this idea around Black women, sexual assault, and the role of the church. Because we know that survivors are in congregations, and we're not really centering Black women when we talk about sexual assault. And there's so many churches that have been taken down because of sexual assault allegations and confirmations. It's like, well, what are we saying to the survivors when this happens? Because also, like, power and control is real. Yes. And it's more than just, oh, we're two adults, but do you have an outsized influence? Are you the pastor who is sexually assaulting women in the church because you're using your power as a pastor to basically run through the church? It's really thinking about, how are we thinking about sex in the church? So I had the idea. I talked to him and I was like, you think our church should do it? And he was like, absolutely. And he suggested you should ask. Like, we have so many pastor friends. Ask around and see if anybody else is interested. Yeah. And girl, everybody say yes. And I was like, wait a minute.
Were you ready for the yes?
No, girl, I was not ready for the yes. I was not ready for the yes. Because I'm thinking, churches don't really have conversations like this. And people don't really want their business out there and exposed. Right. So they're going to be like, no, go away. Right. But we are 4,200 people later. Whoa. Off of 6 conversations that started this year. So, and that's virtual and in person. And the stories of women that have come out of these conversations are heartbreaking and healing at the same time. And the really cool thing I've been able to do is have conversations with young women and like the mothers of the church. And then
older women.
Honey.
They definitely didn't have the space for that in their time.
No. Ooh. And I think too for them it's been liberating to talk about it. Yeah. And also for me to say this is an intergenerational conversation that we are not having. Yeah. Because if you think about the statistics, there are grandmothers and great-grandmothers who have been sexually assaulted. When you even think about our country in general, this country, the United States of America, has been built off of the rape of Black women, period. Because the way that enslavers were able to increase their enslaved people was to rape them. To literally create more enslaved people. More workers. More property, exactly. So, the breeding farms are real. So when you think about what is in our DNA as Black women, that is something that we don't think about reaching all the way back and say, how is this showing up in 2024 that also showed up in 1824? And how are we processing this? And if we're using the same ways to process this as we did in 1824 and 2024, we have a problem. Right. Because back then we were saying to our daughters, nieces, etc., who were going through sexual violence through their enslavers, like, don't talk about it. Kind of hide it because it's only going to get you in further trouble. It's only going to get you sold to the South. It's, using these ways of don't say anything as a source of protection. Because what goes on in this house
stays in the house.
That's what we would do. That strategy is not working for us in 2024. Right.
So at 9 years old, where did you find the courage to break the silence?
Oh, girl, I didn't.
You didn't?
No, I didn't. It just so happened that my abuser had abused so many other kids in kind of my same circle that they just found out I was one of them. Wow. So there was another young person that spoke up first, and literally it was like a domino effect. So after I was confronted, my parents were just like, okay, so we want to talk. And I knew immediately what they wanted to talk about. Because for me, this had been something that I kept secret because I was told to keep it secret. Right. And like as a child at 5 years old, I don't know what's what. I don't really know what's happening to me. Yeah. So I think it's important for parents to, one, talk to your kids about sex. Yes. Even little. So for me, my child has just turned 4. Oh my gosh. And we talk all the time about this is your elbow, that's your penis, because we create these
saying
cutesy,
the word.
oh my gosh, we create these cutesy names. And as a prosecutor, I remember a specific case with this young woman she was a kid, who told her teacher, my daddy ate my cookie. And the teacher was like, oh, okay, thinking she's meaning her daddy ate an Oreo.
Right.
But the whole time, cookie was a word that she used for her vagina.
Right.
And when everybody realized what she was talking about, the weeks that this went on, that the young girl was trying to tell her teacher what was going on, but because she wasn't given the language to talk about it, the horrors that she went through until everybody figured out and it was able to be stopped.
Yeah.
But for me, it's important to have those conversations with my son, and then I'll ask him. Like, I'll be like, so how was camp today? Who did you play with? What did you do? Did anybody touch your penis? Like, literally, we'll have like a list of questions that will go down, and he'll respond, because for me, it's like, how do you make something so normal and have a routine to it so that your kid isn't ashamed to tell you when something happened?
Yes.
And not that those things can necessarily prevent, but it'll help.
Yes.
So, my mother's a nurse. She was very open about sex and what sex is when we were young and giving us proper names. And so for me, it was important to have that language, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But that could be one thing that does not become a barrier for your kid to disclose.
Absolutely. So you're creating a space already. Zay's only 4 years old, and helping him with language and normalizing just body parts and consent.
Because sometimes he'll be like, I want to give you a kiss. I do not consent. I don't want to touch
that's
out.
right.
I am touched out. Leave me alone.
I love it.
And then he'll say too, and I'll tell him, when we're at church, you do not have to hug anybody.
Yeah.
So my default is high fives. I'm like, give Deacon so-and-so a high five. And he has his daps together.
I know that's right.
But I don't want him to feel pressure to touch anybody. The only thing you have to do is say hello.
Right.
Because he will not be rude.
You gotta be respectful. Right.
But hugging and stuff you do not but having that as a standard for a young person that they don't feel pressured is super important, because a lot of times when people are being groomed, that's one thing, touching people and getting them used to that touch and getting them used to pushing that line further and further. That's how grooming works. So for me, it's about how can I prevent that, or at least have a safe space where my kid can actually talk to me about it or say this is happening.
Yeah. How did this test your faith? Because you grew up in church, and we know there's a difference between growing up in church and having your own relationship, right? So how did you make sense of your journey and your healing when you had to see what was happening to all these women, and especially in these faith spaces? Yeah,
that's a great question. So, my abuser actually got let back into the church after he got out of jail.
Oh my God.
So for me, it was it was very interesting. Christianity tells you to forgive and all that, and I remember just thinking, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. And that's one of the reasons why I created these conversations, and I'm helping churches work through their policies, because churches think that forgiveness means you got to forget about it and move forward. It does not mean that. And you really should have policies around having people who are sexual abusers coming into church. Because what I'm not saying is that if you have done something in your past, you should never come back to Christ. You should never. But there should be parameters that as a church we put around people who have that history of sexual violence. And if the people you violated are in the church, you probably shouldn't go back to that. That probably is a really not great, safe idea. So for me, it was just I don't blame anybody necessarily. I think that it was the 90s. You did the best with what you had. So it's because if I walked around with this bitter pill in my heart, I would never move forward. And I think as an abuse survivor, I compartmentalize stuff too. It wasn't until I went to therapy as a child, because my parents were like, you're going to go to therapy. And I kind of was like, this is stupid. I don't want to. Because I'm 9. I don't want to be here. But when I was in law school, I was reading a case about 2 girls who were sexually assaulted, and that triggered me. And I was like, oh my gosh, why am I crying about this case in a textbook? And then I got therapy. Like, I called my parents and I was like, all right, I think I'm ready to go to therapy. And, you know, my parents were super supportive. Like, yes, we've been waiting for you to say something. We'll pay for it. Don't worry about it, because I was in school. Don't worry about it. And Dr. Celeste was my therapist. She was just, oh my gosh, she was so amazing. She was out of First Baptist of Glenarden.
That name sounds familiar.
I can't think of what her last name is right now. She passed a couple years ago from cancer.
Okay.
She was just amazing. But learning how to unpack all of the trauma responses, all of kind of tracing through, okay, I do this because of the abuse. I had no idea. Or like my perfectionism comes through because of the abuse. Because I remember seeing when I was a child, the stat that 1 in 3 girls would be sexually assaulted. And I remember thinking like, wow, I'm a statistic. I don't want anybody to see me as a statistic. So let me perform and perfect and be like this amazing straight A student. So nobody would be like, oh, she's damaged. But even learning from therapy, like that was how my, you know, brain processed that trauma was incredibly important. And even now, I still think, you know, at the time at church, they did what they thought was right.
Right.
So if you're coming from a place of I thought it was right, for me, I gotta let it go. I gotta just trust that, okay, God, that was your plan. That's what you wanted to happen. Like, I can't let that shake my faith, because I would let it, like, it can't. Because I would be in a hole somewhere.
Right.
So, it wasn't easy, but, you know, trauma will make you compartmentalize.
That's true. That is so true. And you had your parents, you had supportive parents, you had a great therapist, it sounds like. And it showed up when you were ready. It sounded like it hit you when you were in school and you were like, okay, now it's time.
Because I always knew I'm going to be a prosecutor because of the abuse. But I did not know how reading about abuse in that context of the law would affect me. I was like, I was shaken. But I'm really happy that I got therapy when I did, because I would have never been able to prosecute sexual assault cases if I had not early on gotten that therapy to help me work through it.
To work through your own stuff. What do you appreciate most about yourself, God, and your support system?
So I want to thank me.
Issa Rae, shout out to you.
I think for me, it's like my audaciousness. Like, I be thinking I can do anything. And I'm like, I don't know where that came from.
That's right.
I'm like, you know, if I want to do it, I do it. And it's like, who gonna stop me? I think for me, that is one of the most cool things about myself, is that I'm not afraid. And if I do get afraid, do it scared, you gonna get up there and just go.
We'll figure it out.
Life is too short. And it's like, I also do not operate from a spirit of fear. I refuse to operate from a spirit of fear. Even when things happen and things get kind of like, you know, nerve-wracking or scary, I'm going to operate in joy, because if it doesn't happen, that's God's protection. So it's like, I'm going to either be nervous and fearful, and then things will just happen the way God wants it to happen. I'm going to be joyful, and things will still happen. The way God wants it to happen. So that's what I'm really grateful about, understanding my relationship with God. Is like, God does things because he knows what he can get out of me. And he knows that I'm going to, like, take my calling serious. And even if, like, one of my scariest stories from the Bible is Jonah. Like, I hate whales for that reason. Like, literally,
Jonah,
I hate whales. We went to Hawaii, and I was like, I do not want to see a whale. Like, I'm not interested. And Jason was like, why? Because I'm going to be eaten by. He's like, whales don't eat people. Yes, they do. Don't read your Bible, young man. So, like, but it's also scary to me, because it's like Jonah was running from what God told him to do. I never want to be in a situation where I'm in the dark because of my own disobedience. So for me, it's like, I'm gonna walk through whatever door, and God, your responsibility is to have
it's on
me.
you.
Period. Right? I don't need to worry, because worry and anxiety, like I have anxiety, and I get the most anxious when I have too much going on. When the microwave timer is going off, and I gotta clean up kitty litter, and then like I have a child asking me for oatmeal with peaches in it and nutmeg, and not like, can you get cinnamon? No, okay, nutmeg. Like, when I just have too much conversion, I get anxious. But I don't get anxious about like this. I don't get anxious about talking to Black women about sexual assault. In the weeks leading up to when I have these conversations, my weeks are normally like in turmoil. But I know that's because the devil does not want.
He's not happy about
my, because the chains, honey, that we are breaking. My God,
girl, I'm about to start running.
Like he does not want people to realize their full potential and to identify what's holding them back. Because if I can hide from you that trauma line and what's holding you back, I got you. But if I can really shine a light and show up and say, okay, this is why you are that way. This is why church makes you freeze up. I had one woman, older woman, amazing. And she was like, she was abused by a minister in her church. And he said, same kind of story where, you know, her case was prosecuted. He got out of jail. And decades later, she saw him at a church event. And he was like, have you forgiven me yet? You still mad at me? Really? Like that's how we show up, and you're a minister, and that's like what you do. I could tell it was scary for her, but it was also freeing. So like when the devil knows you're about to free people, he does know
he will
why, right? And now churches are like, you open up a can of worms. So because now they're actually, you know, examining their policies. They're seeing if they have some kind of child abuse or sexual abuse reporting structure, and who does it go to? Do we have a mental health ministry? Do we have coordinated congregational response, which is one of the things that I talk about? That's like, if you do have an abuse survivor come to you, the church can do a lot, but they can't do everything.
Right.
So who in your congregation has access to the Sexual Assault Coalition or the Rape Crisis Center or is a mental health therapist specializing in trauma and sometimes sexual assault? So how can you map that out as a church so you can literally lead survivors through a path of healing that you couldn't know if you never asked? So, no, child, the devil don't like that.
He don't like that. No.
No. It's not his, that's not his thing. So that's why I know, like, going into conversations, I'm going to have turmoil. And you know what? I just got to pray, journal, meditate, like.
Yeah, that's self-care. So, you know, I'm all about self-care, wellness, resilience. And you are the perfect guest for this. So what are you currently doing for self-care? Because, you know, it can change in every season.
Absolutely.
So what are you doing now?
So one thing I'm really into right now is meditation. So I try to meditate every day. I try to move every day. And I try to be with community as much as possible. Yeah. So for me, I started meditating 10 minutes a day. And to me, it's been really transformative in like, how can I look at my thoughts as like passing things? So how can I be in tune with myself, but not be consumed with like my emotions? Because emotions are so important. They're indicators. They tell us things. But until I sit and be quiet, I can't really interrogate them.
That's true.
Or can't really give them space to like tell me, what is it about this emotion? What is this about this fear or this nervousness? Like, what is it really? Like, what am I getting to really? And I think meditation has been showing me that. I journal in the morning. So when my child wakes up early, he'll come down and says, are you reading your Bible? Can I read your Bible with you? Yes, you can. Because he knows in the morning I'm journaling and reading my word. And you can read too, but you better sit here and be quiet. Right. While I'm reading, and I'll read to him. And to me, that's so important to really connect with God in that way so that I can start my day in like peacefulness and not chaos. And then movement, like I love to like go for a walk. I try to do 30 minutes a day. I don't care what it is. Like I have a Peloton. Get on that bike, girl. That's what I'm telling myself. Get on that bike. Go take a walk if it's nice outside. Go to the gym. Do something to move that energy. I don't want to store that energy in my neck or my back or be so tense. I gotta get it out like that. And then last, like I love hanging out. Oh my gosh, like I can hang out with my girlfriends all the time. Yes. Or like go on date night or just do things where I know I'm connecting with somebody. That's really important to me.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. Now, how can we follow you? How can we book you to speak?
Yes,
you know,
girl.
your company. We need these churches. I mean, I love what you're doing. It's so important to have these conversations. And it sounds like you're getting a whole bunch of yeses. So hopefully you can come over to our church. But how can we reach out to possibly get you to speak, or how can people connect with you? So
you can follow me at Command Joy Co on Instagram. Also Christina at commandjoyco.com. You can send me an email and we can figure out some dates and I can come on over. You can also Follow me on Instagram at Christina Michelle Jones. Happy to see you all there as well. But I'll come to Sharon any day, honey.
Girl, come on over.
Ain't nothing but a word.
We ready. Well, thank you, sis, for this. I'm so grateful for you. And yeah, we're gonna get it out there. We're gonna get the word out there.
Save the world.
Okay. Bye, y'all.
Thanks for tuning in to the Power of Care podcast. If you'd like to hear more, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Power of Care Podcast. And be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at Power of Care _.